You're sitting at the dinner table with your family, the same people who were supposed to be your safe place, your foundation. And one of them, your own father, looks you dead in the eyes and says, "Meg, we love you. We just don't like you," and everyone laughs. The family laughs. The studio audience laughs. Millions of people watching at home laugh, and you just sit there. Now here's the thing. Most of us heard that line and laughed too. I laughed. You probably laughed. Because it's Family Guy, right? It's absurd. It's a cartoon. It's not supposed to mean anything. But I've been thinking about Meg Griffin for a long time now. And the more I think about her, really think about her, past the punchlines and the cutaways and the "shut up" Meg memes, the more I realize something that genuinely unsettles me. We were never supposed to think about her at all. That was the whole point. Meg Griffin was designed to be ignored, dismissed, background noise in her own family. And for over 20 years, an audience of millions went right along with it, laughing at a teenage girl's pain like it was the most natural thing in the world. So today, we're going to stop laughing for a minute, because underneath all the jokes, underneath the cruel one-liners and the reset buttons and the cartoon logic, there is a real story buried inside Meg Griffin. A story about what it means to be the person a family needs to destroy in order to survive. About what it does to someone to grow up being told, in 1,000 different ways, every single day, that they don't matter. And here's what I want you to sit with before we even get started. Meg Griffin might be the most human character this show has ever written. And the show has spent 20 years making sure you never noticed. Family Guy premiered in 1999. More than 2 decades on the air. Countless episodes. 3 seasons of cancellation and resurrection. Cultural moments too numerous to count. We've watched Peter demolish buildings with his bare idiocy. We've watched Stewie graduate from world domination to something resembling a real kid. Brian has written bad novels and had existential crises and died and come back. Chris has been lovably useless. Quagmire has been disturbingly himself. Cleveland got his own show. Through all of it. Through every format shift and cast change and cultural conversation. The Griffins have stayed the Griffins. Loud, chaotic, deeply, structurally broken, and quietly, in every single episode. At the edges of every scene she's allowed to be in. To her, we'll get there. But in the deeper sense, what does it actually mean that the Griffin family needs a scapegoat? What does it say about Peter and Lois and Stewie and Chris that they all, in their own ways, with their own specific flavors of cruelty, have collectively decided that this one girl is the person who absorbs everything? What does it say about us that we watched it and called it comedy? That's the journey we're going on today. And I promise you, by the end of this, you will never watch a Meg scene the same way again. Let's go back to the beginning. Because the beginning is actually important and most people skip over it. When Family Guy first aired, Meg was voiced by Lacey Chabert. She was 14, awkward in that genuine teenage way, self-conscious about the right things. She wanted to be liked by the cool kids. She had crushes that didn't go anywhere. She was embarrassed by her dad, which fair, and vaguely invisible at school. In those early episodes, the show treated her with something close to sympathy. She was the odd one out, sure, but she felt like a real kid navigating real problems. Then season 2 happened. Mila Kunis stepped in, and something changed. It wasn't the voice. Mila Kunis is a great voice actress, and she brought a specific texture to Meg. A kind of desperate sincerity that ironically made her more sympathetic, not less. The change was in the writing. It was like the writers looked at Meg and made a collective decision. Not a dramatic, documented decision. More like a slow drift. A gravitational pull toward a certain kind of joke. A certain dynamic. A certain easiness that comes with having one character everybody is allowed to kick. The jokes got sharper. The dismissals got more casual. The family stopped being indifferent to Meg and started being actively, almost enthusiastically, contemptuous of her. And the question that should haunt you, the one I've never seen anybody really answer, is why her? Why not Chris, who is socially just as unsuccessful, academically even less impressive? Why not Stewie, whose literal homicidal tendencies are played for whimsy? Why is Meg the one whose misery becomes the show's comedic bedrock, episode after episode, season after season? The answer is uncomfortable. Meg was chosen because she's a teenage girl, and somewhere in that early 2000s writing room, there was a consensus, spoken or not, that teenage girls who are earnest and needy and not conventionally beautiful are fundamentally funny, that their desire to be seen is pathetic, that their emotions are too big, too embarrassing, too easy to mock. Meg didn't become the target because of who she is as a character. She became the target because of what she represents. And everything the show has done to her since flows from that original, quietly devastating choice. Now let's talk about the people who are supposed to love her, because this is where it gets genuinely fascinating and genuinely ugly. Every single member of the Griffin family abuses Meg differently. And the way each person does it tells you something damning and specific about who they actually are. Start with Peter. Peter's version of cruelty is the least complicated on the surface. He doesn't dress it out. He doesn't rationalize it or perform guilt about it. He just says what he thinks, with the cheerful obliviousness of a man who has never been required to examine himself. Meg, we love you. We just don't like you. He delivers that line like he's announcing the weather, like it's just information. Like he doesn't understand, and can't understand, that those words from that person could split a kid in half. And here's the thing about Peter. His cruelty toward Meg isn't malice in the classical sense. It's something almost worse. It's displacement. Deep down, in whatever shallow pocket of self-awareness Peter Griffin has access to, he knows he's a bad father. He knows he hasn't shown up the way he was supposed to. He knows his daughter needed something from him, and he was never able to give it. That knowledge sits in him like a splinter, too small to address, too irritating to ignore. So instead of pulling it out, he points at Meg. He makes her the problem. Every joke at her expense is really a confession he'll never make. And because Peter is constitutionally, almost cosmically incapable of self-reflection, he will never know that. Meg absorbs the guilt so he doesn't have to. Now, let's talk about Lois. Because Lois is where Meg starts to come into herself a little. Get some confidence. Get some attention. And you can watch the temperature change in Lois's face. Not pride. Not relief. Anxiety. A very specific maternal anxiety that is actually about Lois. Not about Meg. Lois has built her entire identity around being the desirable one. The attractive one. The woman men notice and want. She is the anchor of the household. The one who maintains the fiction that the Griffins are a functioning family. And part of that function is a clear hierarchy. Lois at the top. A daughter who starts climbing that hierarchy. Who starts getting looked at. Who starts getting wanted. Is not a daughter who is thriving. She is a daughter who is threatening the order. So she pushes back. Gently, most of the time. Passive-aggressively. Which is somehow worse than Peter's bluntness, because at least you can see Peter's contempt coming. Lois's version slides in under cover of concern and advice and the language of love. And Meg, who desperately wants her mother's approval, keeps opening herself up to it every time. Chris gets a pass because Chris doesn't have the cognitive architecture for intentional cruelty. He absorbs the family's attitude toward Meg the way you absorb an accent, unconsciously, through sheer proximity. He treats her badly because he has never been shown another way to treat her. And then there's Stewie. And Stewie's cruelty toward Meg is, in some ways, the most revealing of all. Because Stewie is the most intelligent person in the house by a mile. He is aware. He understands causality and consequence and human emotion in ways that Peter will never come close to. He is capable of genuine depth and tenderness. We've seen it with Brian, in their best episodes together. And yet, Stewie joins in on Meg without hesitation, without apparent conflict, which tells you something crucial. The contempt for Meg in the Griffin household isn't about logic. It isn't a conclusion anyone has reasoned their way to. It's a culture, a set of unspoken rules that everyone absorbs and replicates. Even a genius infant picks up the family's social hierarchy and mirrors it back perfectly. If the adults treat Meg as subhuman, then that is simply what she is. The question never needs to be asked because the answer is already everywhere. The Griffin house has a pecking order, and it was decided, before Meg had any say in it, that she would be at the bottom. Now, if this were just a family dysfunction story, you could hold it at arm's length. You could say the Griffins are a specific kind of broken, that lots of families have a scapegoat, that it's tragic and unhealthy but contained, except it's not contained. The cruelty toward Meg isn't something that starts at the front door of the Griffin house and ends at the property line. It follows her everywhere. Her classmates treat her with contempt. Boys find her repulsive, including, famously, Quagmire, a man whose entire personality is being attracted to literally anything in proximity. There is an episode where Meg develops feelings for Quagmire. And when I say Quagmire is attracted to everything, I mean everything. The show has gone to extraordinarily dark places documenting his appetites. And yet, when Meg shows interest in him, he is physically horrified. He doesn't just reject her, he goes to Peter for help. And together, her own father and the neighborhood creep, they cook up a plan to psychologically dismantle Meg's self-esteem so thoroughly that she stops pursuing him. And the episode plays this as a happy ending. Sit with that. The resolution, the moment the audience is meant to feel relief, is that Meg has been successfully crushed back into the box. The problem wasn't that two adults deliberately destroyed a teenager's sense of self-worth. The problem was that Meg wanted something that is the engine of an entire category of Family Guy storyline. Meg reaches for better. Meg hopes. Meg wants. And the universe reaches back and closes her hand around nothing. She gets a boyfriend. The family ruins it. She finds a group of friends. Something falls apart. She gets popular. She finds a skill. She discovers a community. And every single time, the narrative machinery of the show resets her to zero. The message, delivered so consistently, it becomes almost a law of the show's universe, is simple and devastating. Meg Griffin does not deserve better. But here is where it gets genuinely painful. Here is the thing that elevates Meg Griffin from sad running joke to something that actually aches if you let it. Every once in a while, the writers give her a window, a glimpse of something better, a moment where the world seems like it might open up for her, where she might get to be the version of herself she's been reaching for this whole time. These moments are scattered through the seasons like breadcrumbs, and they are more heartbreaking than any of the abuse, because they prove the writers can see her. They know who she could be. They just won't let her get there. Take doll Meg for murder. Meg ends up in prison. Yes, actual prison. Classic Family Guy. And when she comes out, something has changed. She's harder, more grounded. She looks people in the eye instead of folding under their gaze. There are scenes where she physically intimidates Peter, stands up to the kids at school, moves through her life like someone who has finally, after years of being treated as nothing, decided that's not going to be the truth of her anymore. For a stretch of that episode, watching Meg stand up straight feels genuinely electric. You lean forward. You think this is it. This is who she actually is. And then the show hits the reset button. She goes back. The confidence dissolves. The world returns to normal. This is not an accident. A confident Meg doesn't work for the show, because a Meg with self-respect can't be used as a scapegoat. A Meg with boundaries can't absorb everyone else's dysfunction without consequence. Healing Meg would structurally break the Griffin household. And so healing Meg is something the show will offer a glimpse of, and then always take away. The windows open. They close. And the cruelest part is that Meg keeps looking for them anyway. There's an episode called Screams of Silence, the story of Brenda Q, that I need to talk about, because it does something quietly extraordinary with Meg, and most people watching it probably didn't even notice. The episode centers on Quagmire's sister Brenda, who is in an abusive relationship, and the family gets pulled into trying to help her. It's a heavy episode for Family Guy, tonally. There's real ugliness in it, real discomfort, and in the middle of all of it, Meg is the one who keeps saying it plainly. What Brenda is experiencing is abuse. It is not complicated. It is not her fault. It is not something she should accept or explain away or wait out. Meg names it with a clarity that the other characters, despite being older and presumably wiser, struggle to find. Think about why that is. Think about how Meg knows exactly what to call it. She has been living inside it for her entire life. She knows the shape of it, the way it hides inside ordinary moments, the way it uses love as justification. She has been dismissed and diminished and gaslit and ignored by the people who were supposed to protect her. And that education, painful and unwanted and relentless, has made her the most perceptive person in the room when it comes to recognizing someone else's pain. The character the show gave the least to became the one who could give the most. The girl trained by years of being hurt became the only one who could see when someone else was hurting. There is something in that worth holding onto, because it tells you who Meg Griffin actually is underneath everything the show has piled on top of her. She is not the sad, pitiful creature the family's behavior has tried to make her. She is someone who has survived something real and come out the other side with a kind of empathy that the people around her will never have, because they have never had to develop it. She was broken in specific ways, and those breaks became when Dowsey want to slow down here and spend some real time on an episode called Meg Stinks, because this episode contains, buried inside a lot of absurdist comedy, one of the most genuinely human moments the show has ever produced. The setup is this. Peter and Meg end up handcuffed together. Classic Family Guy, and are forced to spend actual time in each other's company. What starts as punishment for both of them, because of course Peter experiences proximity to his own daughter as a form of suffering, slowly becomes something neither of them expected. They talk, they laugh, they stop being embarrassing dad and invisible daughter and become something closer to two actual people. And there is a moment in that episode where Peter looks at Meg and says, with what sounds like genuine feeling, that he is proud of her, that she is a good person, that he has been wrong. Meg starts to cry. She doesn't fight it or hide it. She opens up completely, because this is the thing she has been waiting her whole life to hear. And the person she needed to hear it from is finally, impossibly, saying it. And then Peter can't hold it. He makes a joke. The moment buckles. The connection snaps shut like a trap in reverse. And Meg is left standing there with her arms out and nothing to hold. I want you to feel how specific that is. Because it is not the cruelty of ignorance. It's something more precise and more painful. It's the cruelty of almost. Of someone who sees you, really sees you, and then flinches from what that seeing would require of them. Of a father who could choose to be different and instead chooses to be comfortable. We've all been on the wrong side of a moment like that. We've all had someone get close to showing up for us and then retreat at the last second. And we know what that particular silence feels like after. Heavier than no moment at all. Heavier than if they'd never tried. That is Meg Griffin's emotional life in one scene. And Family Guy cuts to a cutaway joke. Because that's what Family Guy does. But for just a second before it did, you felt it. And so did she. All right, we have seen the mechanics. The Meg jokes land. Shut up. Meg became a meme that the entire internet uses to this day. A shorthand for dismissing someone you don't want to engage with. People who have never seen a single episode of Family Guy know that Meg is the one everyone hates. It crossed over. It became cultural vocabulary. Oh, why does the systematic humiliation of a teenage girl play as funny to millions of people? Here's the answer. And I don't think it lets any of us off the hook. It works because it reflects something real. Teenage girls who are honest and needy and not conventionally attractive have historically occupied a very specific social position. They are considered safe targets. Their pain doesn't quite count the same way. Their desire to be loved is seen as embarrassing rather than universal. Their hope, their desperation, the specific way they reach for connection, it gets coded as pathetic. And pathetic, in the grammar of pop culture comedy, is always fair game. Family Guy didn't invent this. It's in 1,000 movies and TV shows because it grants her self-awareness and dignity and then pulls them back. There are two very different ways to read what's happening. One reading says the show is participating in exactly the culture it's depicting. It's using the animated format and its own nihilistic brand as cover for doing something genuinely cruel, repeatedly, profitably, to a character who represents a type of person the world has always been comfortable mocking. The other reading says the show is so specifically, so carefully documenting the mechanics of how this kind of girl gets treated, with such obvious understanding of what it costs her, that it's actually functioning as a critique. A mirror held up to the audience. Look at what you're laughing at. Look at what you're participating in. I think both of those readings are true at the same time. And the discomfort you might feel sitting with that is exactly the right response. And then there is Seahorse Seashell Party. I need to build toward this one carefully, because it is the most important Meg episode in the entire run of the show. Not the funniest, not the most plot-heavy, the most important. The episode centers on a hurricane that traps the Griffins at home together, and somewhere in the middle of that night, something in Meg finally breaks open. She confronts the family, all of them, with everything. She tells Peter he's a bad father. Not in the vague, performative way the show usually lets characters score points on each other. She means it. She has the receipts. The specific failures, the specific absences, the specific times he chose himself over her. She tells Lois that the mother act is transparent, that the warmth is conditional and always has been, and that Meg has known that for longer than Lois is comfortable admitting. She goes through all of them. She names what they are to her. She names what it cost her. And the scene is remarkable. It is, by any standard, genuinely good television. The voice work, the pacing, the way the family actually goes quiet. It lands. You feel it land, and something extraordinary happens in the aftermath. With Meg's pain suddenly filling the room rather than being absorbed quietly into the floor, the family has nowhere to put it. They start turning on each other. The dysfunction that Meg usually swallows whole starts ricocheting off the walls. For a few minutes, without their designated scapegoat in position, the Griffins are exposed. Every ugly thing they've been able to ignore because Meg was always there to carry it. It is chaotic and uncomfortable, and it feels, for a moment, like the show is about to do something real, and then Meg takes it back. She apologizes. She reassumes her position. She tells them, in words that should devastate anyone paying attention, that she understands what she is to this family, that they need her to be the bad one, the broken one, the one that makes everyone else feel better by comparison, and she is willing to keep being that for them, because she loves them. The show frames this as a kind of heroism. Meg as the willing martyr, the person who holds the family together by letting it fall apart on her. And on the surface, there is something recognizable in that. Something that people who have played that role in their own families will understand in their bones, but step back from the framing for a second and look at what is actually happening. A 17-year-old girl has just looked at the people who are supposed to protect her and said, "I will keep letting you hurt me, because I love you more than I love myself." That is not heroism. That is the deepest damage the Griffins have done to her. The fact that Meg has come to believe her value is her capacity to absorb pain. That love for her is not something she receives. It is something she performs, endlessly, at cost to herself, for people who will never fully return it. She is not choosing to be strong. She is choosing what she has been taught is her only option. I want to step back one more time, because everything we've talked about lives inside a show that is, at its core, a comedy. A show that has never fully committed to treating Meg's story as the tragedy it is. Family Guy has demonstrated, in episode after episode, that it understands exactly what it built with Meg Griffin. The Seahorse Seashell Party monologue, the Dial Meg for Murder transformation, the Meg Stinks almost connection. These are not accidents. These are writers who see her, who understand her damage at a granular, psychological level, and who choose, for reasons of tone and format and audience expectation, to keep putting the walls back up around her rather